Good morning, everybody. Yes, I did get ordained. I actually got ordained, I think it was, I can't even remember when it was, 96 maybe. Went out to Hawaii to do a workshop and retreat of somebody that channeled Jesus. It was beautiful work, and she asked us, invited us, and I wasn't quite ready to take ownership of it, so I got reordained through a system recently, and just my commitment, my love, my passion for God, and I don't want to hide from that in any way. So the talk today is the beauty of mistakes, and so I'm planning on making at least 3 or 4 of them during this talk. I find that when I choose a topic, God will somehow find a way to make it known and help me to be at peace of what I'm speaking with. I once gave a talk on with God, everything is possible. And I found myself driving down the road. I was doing deliveries and catering at the time. The roads were not so good that day. And but they had started clearing up. But I came down to these dirt roads, and sometimes dirt roads, it'll melt and it'll ice over, and it was a shady area. So I came from the pavement to the dirt road where it was completely iced over, followed by a 90-degree turn. And needless to say, I did not make it, but how I missed the trees, I will not know, but all I know is I did miss the trees, and as I'm down in this ravine, I'm looking over, and I look over, and the guy says, "Hi," because he had done the same thing. And he said, "Just so you know, the tow truck probably won't be out here for another," I think he said 6 hours. And I'm like, what, So I remembered that I'm doing this talk on With God, All Things Are Possible. And I thought, do I have this up? I want to make sure. So I thought to myself, do I really believe that? And I thought, yes, I do believe that. And so I prayed, and I'm like, God, it does look like there's no way I can get out. I'm down in this ravine, this ditch, in the snow, and I don't see how this is possible, but I know it is. And so after the prayer, I started my car back up, and I looked around. I'm like, okay, well, this ditch kind of goes very steep, but it looks like it kind of segues out of there, transitions back onto the road. So I got a bit of a running start as much as I could in the snow in the ditch, and I got a little hooked up under some brush underneath. I backed out, and I went up, and I got back on the road, and the guy looking over at me, I don't know if his jaw was fully open, but he said, "How did you do that?" I go, "I have no idea, But this is the beauty of sometimes when we do things, right? That we don't know what's going to happen. We don't need to know what's happening. What I find more and more is, as I'm having trust that everything is unfolding as it needs to, it all ends up working out perfectly. And I was talking to my wife, Laura, this morning, and we were talking about, I had looked up a friend of mine who's a handyman because we need some work done around the house. And I looked him up, and I had noticed that he had passed away. And I'm like, what? He's not that old, But I met Brian because he had come over to our house to do some plumbing. We had some drain issues in our basement, and he said, this isn't going to work. Your drain is not working right. We need to tear the floor up. And I said, how much are we looking at? He said, about $1,200. I said, I don't have that kind of money. It is what it is. I'll just have to do my best and keep snaking out as often as I can. And so anyhow, he calls me up a couple days later, and he said, hey, why don't you clear everything out of the way of where your pipe runs underneath your basement floor? I go, hey, Brian, I appreciate it, but I just don't have the money. He said, myself and a couple guys are going to be coming over. We'll take care of it. And I was so moved by his generosity. And the backstory on that, as Brian comes over, I start talking with him, and I start talking with his other friend. I said, how do you guys know each other? They said, from church, but we also spent prison time together. And I go, okay, what were you guys in prison for? And Brian said, he said, actually, I was part of a group that murdered somebody. And I said, okay. And the other guy said, I was part of the group as well. And actually, I don't know if he was part of the group or actually part of the murder, the other gentleman. And they had met each other through church, and they were just wanting to give back. And I was so moved by their hearts. I mean, it was just so sweet that they just wanted to give back. They knew that they had done some damage in the world, but they had moved to a place to see that they have an opportunity to give back, to take what they had learned and give back. And it was just so touching, the whole thing. And I was going to give them at least a couple $100, and I heard a voice in my head said, don't give them anything. And I thought, why not, you know? And then I realized that they needed to do this. It was something that they needed to feel good about, just fully giving. And so I did buy him some pizza, got him some drinks and stuff, but it was just such a moving experience. So Brian got out of the prison, and we were talking, and he was just listening to me, you know, as I was trying to support him, having compassion for his journey of what he had been on. It's okay. And shortly after that, his brother called me and said, Brian's back in jail. And I thought, oh, gosh. And he had relapsed, and he ended up stealing for drugs, and he ended up going back to jail for another 6 or 7 years. And I went to visit him, and not many people went to see him. And so he was so moved by the fact that I was there for him. But I just felt like we had developed something that was just beyond our experiences. It was just really quite beautiful. And then he got out, and he ended up having a thriving business and was just doing so well. And then when I looked up to see about him being a handyman, I go, what? He died. What's going on here? You know, and I didn't know. And I've texted his brother just a couple weeks ago. And I said, what happened? And I haven't heard back. So I don't know what happened. But Laura, I told her this morning, she goes, Brian died, you know, and it was just, it was kind of shocking with the whole thing. But we ended up having this conversation. It's like some of our best friends are, well, I can't say they're murderers or part of a murder, but they've been drug addicts, they've been alcoholics, they've been, you know, it's like they've gone through the ringer, and then they've come back to say, come on, there's got to be something more than this. And I would say probably everybody here has been through at least enough to come to that point to say there's got to be something more than this. And one of my favorite, let me grab my sheet here. Are we counting the mistakes? I thought you weren't supposed to be speaking, Al. Okay. So yes, that is number one. We can count that, Al. Thank you for that reminder. No, this is actually, I could look a little bit more Baptist and have a Bible up here right now. This is actually from Luke 15, and I just love this. It's not real long, but to me it's beautiful, and a lot of you have heard it. It's the parables that Jesus is speaking of. And it moves from the parable of the lost sheep to the parable of the lost coin into the parable of the lost son, or also known as the prodigal son. So Jesus is there and said, so now the tax collectors and sinners, and when we use the word sin, most people probably know this, but in the biblical days, it was when the archer missed the mark. That was called sinning. So just to take the sting out of it, if anybody has any sting with that anymore. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." Then Jesus told them this parable. Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he is joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. Then he calls his friends and neighbors together and says, "Rejoice with me, I have found my lost sheep." I tell you that in the same way, there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who do not need to repent. Then he goes on with a parable of the lost coin. Or suppose a woman has lost 10 silver coins and loses one. Doesn't she shine a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? And when she finds it, she calls her friends and neighbors and said, "Rejoice with me, I have found my lost coin." In the same way, I tell you, there is rejoicing in the presence of angels over one sinner who repents. And then lastly, we lead into the parable of the lost son. And I do know this one fairly well, so I'm not going to read it. And that is when two boys and their father, they're supposed to inherit the money from the father, and one of them asked for the inheritance early and said, I want to take the money and I want to go out and just live life now. Would you do that? And his father said, "Gladly, I'll give that to you." So the son takes all the money, he goes to another land, and he finds himself partying and just squandering all the money until he has none left. And at that point in time, he's starting to feel hungry and like, I need to do something. So he starts working, and he's really realizing that at this point in time, he realized that the workers for his dad have it better than he does, because at least they have food in their belly. And so after a lot of trials and tribulations, he finally humbly comes back and returns home to his father. And Jesus is telling this story. We don't actually know whether the story is true or if it's just a metaphor, but he's telling the story as the son returns home to the father. And the father is elated. He's so happy. And the father says, "Kill the fatted calf, let's celebrate." And that was a big deal. To kill the fatted calf was a huge a financial thing to make that choice. And so he does that. And meanwhile, the other son is like, "What's going on here?" And one of the workers tells him what's going on and says, "Your dad is celebrating your son, your brother, he's home, you know." He was furious. And he says to his, so he won't come in to gather in the celebration and the party with the rest of them. His dad says, "Please, son, come in and join us." He said, "Dad, how could you? I've been here all these years, and I've been dutiful to you. I've served you, and now he takes all his money, he squanders it, and you want to celebrate him." And he said, "I would gladly celebrate you as well. You can have the money. You can have anything you want that I have." He said, "I never asked you to stay here." You know, the moral of the story is, don't go out and squander all your money. But you can. You can. Was that another mistake, Al? Is that two or not? Oh, okay, all right. We're off the hook on that one. But the moral of the story is, go out there. Make mistakes, have fun, do what you need to do until you're ready to come back home. And I made that choice a long time ago to come home because, there's something just amazing. And we talk about, like, from a Christian point of view, I don't call myself a Christian. My wife is, but I love Jesus. I love the teachings of Jesus, but also Buddha and many others as well, like many of you do here. But when a Christian talks about being saved, they're talking about really giving themselves entirely over, for many of them, Jesus, or it could be God. It doesn't matter. What you're doing is giving your person, this idea of who you think you are, over to something greater than who you are, which many call God or Jehovah or whatever you want to call it. It doesn't matter. The label's not important. What is important is if you want to make this choice to say, I don't want to live this limited life that I've lived for so long. And sometimes that means going out and making mistakes. I was thinking of the poem by Robert Frost, that says, two roads diverged into the woods, and I took the one less traveled, and that has screwed me up the whole time. We don't know. We don't know what that road is going to provide sometimes. But what happens sometimes is we're lamenting so much over whether we're making the right choice or not, we don't make any choice at all. Go make the choice. Take the road less traveled, take the road traveled by everyone. I don't care. Take the road. Because you will know when you go on the one road, you will decide and know that wasn't the right road, but guess what? I know which one the right one is now. And that's what exploration is, exploring who we are, going out there and just saying, hey, I don't know where this is going to lead. But I trust that I'm going to, by putting my best foot forward, I trust that it is leading to somewhere back home to the Father, back home to who we are. I feel like it's a little short, but I also feel like I feel complete. So, and we were overtime anyhow, so I'm going to let that be my third mistake and we'll be good.